I don't forget that later.
So do we have a quorum?
Yep, we have a quorum, and it is 12:17.
Well, guess what we're going to do? I'm going to call this meeting to order with a roll call, if we can, please.
Sure, yeah, I can do that really quick. Let me just promote Chantel here to panelists. So joining us today, September 8th, Thursday, is Board Member Chair Joe Pishinary, Board Member Howard Saxon, Board Member Mike Fleck, Board Member Joe Burney, Board Member Terry Fitzpatrick. From LRAPA staff, we have Director Steve Dietrich, myself, Travis Knutson, Julie Lindsay, Aaron, Cassandra, Chris, Colleen, Debbie, Jonathan, Katie, Lance, and Max. We also have Mary Bridget Smith with us currently, and Courtney Grisell from SPI. And then also LRAPA has a new employee that has joined us, Chantel Green, who you can see on the camera I promoted. Chantel, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself real quickly to the board?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you all, and thanks for having me. A little bit about me. I've been in the environmental field for about 7 years. I began with 5 of those years working for a forest products company headquartered in Southern Oregon with facilities throughout the United States, and did a little bit of drafting emission inventories for permit applications and reporting purposes. Conducting internal audits for the company at facilities across the country. And then the last 2 years, I worked as an air quality consultant for a consulting firm up in Portland. So further developing skills on emission inventory development for Clean Air Oregon, conducting permit applicability determinations for facilities, questioning whether or not they needed an air permit. And yeah, so I'm really looking forward to continuing to develop those skills at LRAPA and learning how we do things as an agency. Have been enjoying getting started coming up to speed on complaint and outdoor burning complaint investigations. So I'm excited for all that's to come here.
Well, welcome aboard, very much welcome aboard. And you sound like you got an incredible resume and incredible work history already. And so I think you will definitely complement our crew here. So thank you so much for applying, and looks like you did a good job there getting hired. So.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Right on.
And that's all attendance for those who are present currently. Joe, Chair.
Oh, thank you, sir. So let's go ahead and go with, is there any adjustments to the calendar or to the agenda? None? Okay. Any public participation? Anybody from the public wishing to speak?
We do have some public participation here today. That would be Courtney from SBI. I don't know if Courtney has any intent to speak. Courtney, if you do, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll let you have an opportunity to unmute your mic and speak. If not, then I think she might just be wanting to watch for today. I don't see your hand raised. Okay. And anybody else, members of the public, raise your hand too, but I don't see any hands going up.
Excellent. Okay. You see no one else, Travis? Okay, sounds good. So is there any next action item number 4 would be the approval of the consent calendar. I would entertain a motion for that.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. So it's moved by Joe and seconded by, I didn't catch you. I saw Howard or Terry. Mike, doesn't matter. So all those in favor signify by an aye, and maybe just go ahead and raise your hand as well.
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. It looks unanimous. No one with a nay. So that motion is carried. Next item is going to be reports. So your report from our LRAPA partners meeting.
Chair Joe, members of the board, maybe I didn't communicate this well. and maybe it's in the wrong place on the agenda, but where we have the consent calendar, there's also the board work sessions where we have to talk about some proposed dates.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't mean to put it there to discourage the discussion, but I needed to put it in a place up early so you have time to talk about it.
Oh, yeah. I missed that too. Typically, the consent calendar would have everything that is basically a stamped item. So no, let's pull. We would let's see. Is it too late? We can recall that motion and pull item number C, and I would entertain a second motion or another motion to approve the consent calendar with items A and B with the item C pulled, and then we can discuss item C.
I would just have Joe, who made the motion, and Howard, who seconded it, amend their motions.
Okay, go ahead and amend the motion.
Anyone want to help me with that? I apologize. What are we amending it to?
Oh, you just need to amend your earlier motion of the consent calendar to motion to approve items A and B on the consent calendar with item C pulled from that.
Thank you. So moved. Items A and C with item B removed for approval.
I'll second.
Perfect. Now, so another signify by aye, raising hands. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimously. Okay, now Steve, go ahead and you can talk about item number C on the consent calendar.
Yes, Chair Joe, members of the board. Last time we met, which was back in June, it was discussed quite a bit by the board members and brought up by the chair, Joe himself, that we needed to think about some work sessions so we have time to explore things in more detail outside of the normal board agenda items where you have more time to speak about things in more detail. And so where we left it was we needed to discuss not only the frequency, but some possible dates and what some of the topics could be to consider to kind of start us off on the right foot on being able, what's worthy of a work session versus what can be taken care of in other ways.
So we can open up that discussion with board members present. So did we have, I didn't see, unless I'm missing it, was there proposed dates on this material, Steve?
Chair Joe, members of the board, there is not. Nothing's written down, nothing's suggested, although I do have some topic suggestions, but in talking with individual board members, it's been suggested the frequency could be more frequent than every other month, but quite possibly starting out on a quarterly type frequency.
And I like that personally. To any input from the board members in regards to, you want to start off at a quarterly work session and see if we have a higher demand. I got a thumbs up all the way around. Not a vote issue, it's just concurrence. So that sounds like the first out of the gate plan, Steve. So we can set that up. Maybe you can look at some dates, and maybe Travis can look at some dates as to when we're going to do our first work session. And then if you would please send out the possible topics or list of topics to the board members, so that way we can get some feedback from the board members on what items wish they would like to discuss and set out plans, et cetera, whatever needs to be done during the work session.
Chair Joe, be glad to do that. I think one thing I need to bring up is, because this would be another meeting with a quorum size membership of the board, that we would have to advertise that ahead of time. I think the minimum is at least 5 days, but then the topics, we need to be smart about how many topics we try to put into a work session and how many hours we want to try to meet, how much time you want to allot each time.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to require more than our current board meeting time. But, and I know we have to do public notice, and public is welcome to join us, because that we're not going to have the typical public input ability, any ability to that. And plus it will free you up from having to do our typical board business. We can go straight into projects and ideas. So yeah, that would be great. And I don't see any, unless the board members see otherwise, I just see that we can go with the basic meeting time of a work session, or even maybe even abbreviated that, but I don't see going beyond what we normally do. Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
If we're going to have a work session, unless there's objection, could we do it in person?
I would love to. I would love to. And in fact, we still have to offer Zoom, you know, by statute now. But I think that and that's going to be maybe a project for Travis to work on and Steve to work on to figure out, okay, how we're going to make that happen. It's not really all that difficult. It's just a matter of having a camera and microphone present and a monitor wherever we happen to be meeting. And I think that we do have the hardware there already at LRAPA. So we'll make it work. And I definitely appreciate that. And it looks like Travis said that the conference room is set up for hybrid meetings. So yeah, we'll go ahead and request that board members be present and honor the ones that do not want to be.
There, Joe, members of the board, it sounds like a plan. And, you know, because it is a work session, it's the kind of thing where the public can join in, but they may not be able to make any comments. They can just listen.
Correct.
And then when you think about it, the time of day, whether it's an evening thing, which lends itself to whatever we want to do, but then also, or keeping it to the same time frame that we normally have the board meeting. It's totally up to what you want to do.
Well, let's put that out to the board and go with the majority. Does that sound fair to the board members that are present here?
I would just recommend doodle polls and covering a broad range.
Right.
I have to admit, I'm already missing 2 Thursday lunches from Rotary as it is now a month, and I can't really afford another Thursday noon. So like I said, I'm kind of hoping for some, and I'm pretty busy. So, and I imagine all you guys are. So this may be a challenge, but I'm certainly supportive.
Well, Mike, my envisioning on this was not to add a meeting to our normal schedule of LRAPA meetings, but to use one of the meeting times already saved for a board meeting, but to reserve it for a work session.
Oh, better yet. That sounds awesome.
That's what I thought.
I love that idea.
Thanks for letting us know, Chair. That makes sense.
Okay. For once. Okay. So yeah, I think if we can go from there, Steve, you got enough information, and Travis to be able to see if we can't get something ironed out. And it's going to be interesting because it'd be fun, I think, because it's something that the LRAPA board's never done before. And I'd like to be able to get this. I think it bodes well for good organization for an organization such as ours.
Chair Joe, members of the board, I think we have enough to go on, and this is an opportunity for us to try to get more accomplished by doing this.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, Mike.
Can I offer one wrinkle? We may want to present a format where if there are items that have to come forward, say an appeal of action, that we have a section, you know, briefly in the front, just in case of something that just cannot wait.
Oh, yeah. But I think any work session, we can always add that to the public notice. If there's something if there's what you're calling an action item that we have to do because it's time sensitive, then we can add it. We can go into, you know, do our work session and then go into the public session after the work session and take care of it in that manner.
I think I'd do it the other way around. But.
Or whichever. Yeah, I'm fine with either way. Sounds good to you, Terry? Okay. Howard, you're good with all that? Perfect. All right. So I don't know, Mike or Travis, somebody help me with this on this. It was item number C on the consent calendar. I don't know if our discussion actually requires a vote. So I think we just basically removed number C or item C from that consent calendar, and that's where it's going to stay as removed. Okay, perfect. So going through let's look at the reports section, item number 5. What do you have there, Steve?
Chair Joe, members of the board, this first item here on the LRAPA partners meeting that happened on August 19th is basically just to inform you that we did do this. We advertised to the partners, actually contacted the partners earlier in the calendar year and told them we plan on having face-to-face meeting or some type of meeting, ended up being virtual in this case, to talk about mostly a meet and greet opportunity between their staff, our staff. We invited people like city managers and financial director type people, because really what it was about is trying to talk about what LRAPA does, what services we provide, what our mission is, introduce our employees, since both Julie and I are new, for example, so they could see who we are. And then we also got into a discussion about the services we provide and from an air quality perspective, and then talk about some key items. Didn't go through it line by line, but just made them aware of what the IGA is, and that actually needs to be actually signed again, circulated around for some new signatures, and preempting them with some information that the board previously allowed us to take a look at how our dues are calculated, to include maybe level of service provided to each partner, and the importance of those partner dues and how they actually come to play with how the money is allocated to LRAPA from the state. And it's important that we maintain our maintenance of effort so we can still leverage the funds that we need to do our work. That was the gist of the meeting. Was, like I said, more of a meet and greet. We did last for a little over an hour. There were a lot of good questions back and forth. So there's some interest there in each of us learning about each other's work and how we can actually partner for other types of opportunities for funding in the future as well.
Excellent. And I have a question from Howard. Go ahead.
Yeah, Steve, I looked through the presentation, and I just want to commend you and your staff for putting that together. I think this has been long overdue. I've been on the LRAPA board for about 2 years, and I've always, at least from my perspective, felt that LRAPA hadn't done a good enough job to really inform your partners about what LRAPA does and the benefit to Lane County, as opposed to just having Oregon DEQ operate the air quality program for Lane County. So anyway, I thought it was excellent, and appreciate you taking the initiative to do that.
Chair Joe and Howard, members of the board, I appreciate that comment, and it's a springboard for some things we're going to continue to do. As a matter of fact, your board member Joe Bernievers has already kind of got me lined out to go address the county commissioners, and I've already got that set up for October 11th at 10 o'clock to address the commissioner members, which I understand maybe has not been done very frequently in the past, if at all. And again, meet and greet, what LRAPA does in the face of any kind of changes personnel-wise. It's good timing to do this, and I plan to do this with all the partners. I had a lot of help to put the presentation together, so I appreciate the fact that you took the time to read it, and maybe you learned something from it. That's great.
Thank you, Steve. And that was a great idea, Joe.
So just absolutely brilliant.
It was.
No, I'm sorry. That's obviously too immodest here. Honestly, I was a little frustrated that this hasn't occurred. Once in the 4 years I've been a county commissioner. I'm a little frustrated, forgive me for being this way, that it has yet to occur to any public body that's a partner of LRAPA and that is contributing. So I guess I would say, Steve, I believe that's October 10th or 11th. Did you say you're going to present to the Lane County Board of Commissioners so the commissioners know who the hell we are and what we do and who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I worked with Deanna this morning. It's October 11th.
Right. So my question is, when is your schedule? When are you scheduled to complete a circuit of making this presentation to all of our partners, elected bodies?
I'm not sure if I have a schedule. I was going to try to knock it out this fall to all of them.
Great. Thank you. Sorry, just wanted to ask. That was put together hastily this morning, everyone. So current event.
No, I would look forward to that at the Springfield Council. And we did actually used to hear almost annually from LRAPA, but it usually was at the budget meeting with wanting extra funds. So that was about the only time we heard from them. So this would be great if we just get a check-in and the opportunity for all the different elected people on our council and the mayor to ask questions of you And even if they don't have questions, then fine, but at least the opportunity is presented. And if they happen to have something, then it just forms a better partnership.
I can tell you that I have been injecting myself in some other meetings and just listening to some of the Springfield Council meetings, just getting a flavor for the topics that they cover. And some of the new groups that are being formed in the city of Eugene, for example, dealing with toxics. So we volunteered to make presentations at some of those meetings that are already established, and we've also just gone to listen. Travis has been part of some of those events as well. So we're trying to get our name and face out there a little bit more and use it more as an educational and a partner building exercise.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Anything else from the partners meeting, Steve?
No, that's it for that.
Okay. So let's go on to item number 6 from the advisory committee, please.
Okay, Jim Daniels, I just promoted you to panelist, and then also board member Chrissy Hollett has joined us. Chrissy, I've clicked the button to promote you to panelist. I'm not sure if you're seeing that show up on your screen to accept it, so you can join the rest of the board up here, but she is with us now.
Congratulations on your promotions, everybody.
Thank you. I just clicked it.
Good to see you, Chrissy.
Sorry, I joined on late today, guys. We've got lots of meetings going on, and just it's a busy time in Oak Ridge right now.
We're glad to see you here.
No kidding.
Yeah, very busy times. Okay, so I'm sorry I interrupted the beginning of the report. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, well, not a lot to report. We did not meet in August like you, and in our July meeting, we had the Purple Air program presentation by Travis. The hope had been that we'd have some members of the public attend that as well as part of the outreach. And I don't believe we had that, but it was good for the committee to hear it. And so for this month, we will be taking back up the permittee survey.
Okay. Sounds good. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Jim?
No, thank you. That should do it.
Perfect. So moving on to item number 7. Thank you for everything you do, Jim, by the way, and please express that to the rest of your committee members, okay? Okay. So next item, number 7.
Yes,
Steve, it's yours. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Chair Joe, members of the board. This is a director's report. There's some prelude to some really good news when we get to the public affairs section of this. But I'm going to highlight some of the normal pages like I normally do. And if you want to stop me for questions, feel free to do so. But yeah, this couldn't be better timing with our great air quality we've had all summer long, except for in July and August. You can see here we've had some marginal days, some moderate days rather, both for PM and ozone. And then we had for July 25th was an ozone day, and August 17th was an ozone day. Just to point out, there's other pollutants that we do monitor besides PM, which is usually the one we always concentrate the most effort on. But because of the events of this summer with no rain and no wind and high temps, you do get ozone occurrences. And so the AQI reflects that, and that's what you see here. Just so you know, the standard for ozone is 70 parts per billion, which is not the same scale that you see here for AQI, because the AQI scale is unitless. It's not compared to the National Ambient Air Quality Standard for ozone. Any questions there before I move on? Okay, so moving on to the complaint.
Hold on a second, Steve. I think Howard's got his hand up. Go ahead, Howard.
Sorry.
Yeah, just a quick question. Was the ambient air quality standard for ozone, was it exceeded on the 25th?
Yes. On the 25th.
What was, do you know what the value was off the top of your hand, top of your head?
I do not know what that correlates to. You can cross compute it from the AQI, but I do not know how high it was. Keep in mind that the ozone standard is an 8-hour average. And in order to get a design value, it's a 3-year process to show non-attainment issues. So one exceedance like this does not make us non-attainment.
I understand. I was just kind of curious as to what the concentration was.
We can find that out and go back through the data and see what that was.
Okay, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
We can. Thank you. You good? All right, moving on to complaints. What you see there is 17 industry complaints, 15 from international paper. Incidentally, for the month of July, incidentally, you'll see there that international paper, they're all from one address. And then the same goes for the complaints for industry in August.
Wait, I'm sorry, Steve. Do you say all 17 complaints for IP were from one individual?
All 15. There's
Okay.
17 total for the month for industry. 15 of those were for international paper, and they were all from the same address.
Thank you.
Yes. And then you see the other complaints for July, but moving into August, you see again the front runners for complaints was a combination of industry and then some unknown odors and other types of complaints that are listed there in the international paper complaint tally for 14. They were all from one person there in Springfield. Okay, just so you're curious, in case you are curious, that is. And moving on to the table. Sorry.
Go ahead, Joe.
I apologize. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Steve. Just out of curiosity, the 15 complaints for one thing and with IP and the 14 complaints for another, were all 29 complaints from the same address?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the annual table here, you see that the outdoor burning and industry is 325 of the total 456 complaints that we've received so far in calendar year 2022. No surprise there, but outdoor burning has been quite busy, just like industry complaints have been as well. And so I'm moving on unless there's a question there. And then moving on to enforcement. Enforcement, since we're spanning 2 months, July and August, we have some new enforcement actions, some follow-up from ones previously to July, and then some that are pending. We'll go into more detail with each one of those next. On the new categories, you see that there's, you want to scroll up, there you go, Travis. Alpine Abatement Services is it's now asbestos. That case is actually closed. The amount of fine for the violation has been paid. And so that one is no longer on the books, but it's tallied as closed. And then moving on to the second one here, it's another asbestos survey that was not completed by Brogan and Michelle Raybright. They requested a hearing. The request for hearing was received, but then it was denied due to the request. It took too much time for them to exceed the 21 days that are allotted. So therefore, what has happened, it's still pending, and a default order and judgment to be placed as a lien on the property is there to be taken place. It's up to the individual whether or not they want to contest that or not. And if that is the case, then we will be in a position there of having to make a decision. That's why it's still pending. Moving on to Swanson Group. The Swanson Group is actually one of our Title V facilities, and they had an opacity exceedances from their wood-fired boiler some time back, and the case is about ready to be taken care of, but it's still pending as of the end of August. The source of the opacity violation has been taken care of, and the operations is putting measures in place to make sure it doesn't happen again, and then waiting to see if the fee comes in for the violation itself. As of August, it had not. Moving on to the next one is the I don't know how you pronounce this, Tabit or Thabit Management. This is actually a gas distribution facility where they did not do timely vapor triennial vapor testing requirements to meet the requirements of the regulations. And so that non-compliance with penalty was issued back in earlier August, and it's still pending, awaiting their reply. Number 5 here, Cottage Grove. Again, it's an asbestos survey that was not done before they actually did the work, and it's pending, waiting for their reply. Moving on to actions previously taken care of, but then we're still waiting for activities. Some of these are closed, some of these are still pending. So for Kingsford Manufacturing, located in Springfield, it's another one of our Title V facilities. They make charcoal briquettes that most people are aware of. They exceeded 20% opacity from one of their emission units. And then they failed to notify us with the permit condition as stated, and then they failed to submit a written report. So what we ended up doing is non-compliance with penalty, and they actually issued or paid the fine and put measures in place to prevent it from happening in the future, and the case is now closed. Moving on to Oregon Industrial Lumber Products. I'll pause there for a second. Previous question to you from you, Howard, was the ozone standard on the 8-hour ozone reading on July 25th was 66. So it was still within the 70 parts per billion standard. Sorry about that. And then the Oregon Industrial Lumber Products. This one is, they continue to operate a wood-fired boiler, had a lot of fallout going on to the property. Initial action was taken, and then they installed this multi-cyclone back on July 12th. In other words, they rectified what was causing the fallout from happening in the neighborhood. And it's operational. We've been out there to see it. Our inspectors have. And so subsequently, we followed it up with the enforcement action that you see here for $3,200. Still waiting for them to respond to that request. Okay. And then let's see.
Hey, Steve, when you got, while we have a little break here, whatnot, just curious, and it randomly fell into my brain here, do we have a system where if they correct an issue, is there any benefit to them doing that, as opposed to, well, we got a fine set here and you're going to pay it anyway, whether you fix it or not? I mean, whether you fix it in a quick manner, or is there any kind of stimulus for them to rectify issues?
Well, I think I understand your question, Chair Joe. Our matrix of how we calculate the penalty takes into account cooperative efforts by the facility. But there are instances where if they violate our rules, there still may be a penalty, but it may not be as high depending on how quickly they address the situation. Whether or not they do things ahead of time, we take that into consideration if they find it themselves before we do, or if they put something in place that shows that they're being proactive and it's not going to happen again. We take all of that into consideration as part of the final settlement that's made on the penalty.
Yeah, I thought they did, and I know we've talked about it before. I just want to, make sure that we got a good, strong reward system in place.
Yeah, one of the things we don't do is we do not necessarily eliminate the entire penalty.
Well, we have administrative costs, I understand too.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
We take all those into consideration. Yes.
Thank you.
Moving on to the ministry construction. This is another asbestos survey that was not done prior to doing the work. And so we issued the non-compliance with penalty in June 1st, and there was no response. So therefore, this one actually went to put a lien on the property, and the case is now closed. Okay. The next one is Daniel Basaraba. This is one of two that we'll be talking about. This one happened quite some time ago for open burning violation, and responded, has been responded somewhat. He has sought the efforts of an attorney to help him. And then this one actually, scheduling of a hearing on hold pending the settlement negotiation. I think there's counter offers that have been made on the penalty that we're still working with Mr. Brasa-Raba on this one. And therefore, that's why it's still pending. Depending on how this one goes and the one we'll talk about in a minute, we may end up combining both of those when it comes to settlement, but we'll see how they play out individually first. Okay, and then moving on to Chris and Julie, Chris Johnson and Julie Renfro. This one is a open burning nuisance outdoor burning that was more than likely triggered by a complaint. And we went out to investigate. And this one, again, had a non-compliance with penalty. It was returned. We had to reissue it. And then it was served again on August 8th. And so no response. And therefore, there's going to be a default order and judgment in process for a lien on the property. So it's still pending there. And that's the route that one is taking. A lot of times these liens that are placed on the property is just because the person is not responsive in time for us to, and we have to move on to the next step. Moving on to Forest Paint Company. Okay, yeah, Forest Paint is another. For some reason, my list is different than this list. They're in a different order. I'm sorry. So
I'm having trouble hearing. I'm sorry.
What's that?
Just having trouble hearing you.
Well, I keep turning up my volume here.
I might be the only one.
Okay, Forest Paint. It's.
Was that you, Joe, that we're having a hard time hearing that?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
I'm not surprised, but it's all right. It's not a big deal. We all hear him very well.
Why? Okay.
I mean, I'm hitting 70. I'm allowed to not be able to hear very well.
The rest of the board members got to know that Joe and I have a great relationship, and we badger each other all the time. If you haven't noticed, so I always say it in jest. I'm definitely not being actually mean to him.
Speak for yourself, Chair. I'm sorry. Sorry,
so
Steve.
go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
So this one is they were failed to operate and maintain their air contaminant collection unit called a biofilter, so that minimizes the air contaminant discharges. And so, once knowledge was acquired of how their maintenance wasn't being done correctly and their parametric data monitoring was discovered that they need to ensure that the biofilter is operating at the highest reasonable efficiency. That wasn't being done. So they're on schedule with fixing that, and on schedule with submitting their biweekly status reports. But the notice of non-compliance was issued, and it's still pending the outcome of how we want to pursue getting to the resolution. Moving on to the second Daniel Brasa-Raba at the same piece of property at a different date. This one's an asbestos survey that was not done prior to the work that was being done. There's some allegations that were expressed on violations, and therefore a notice of non-compliance was issued. Initial action was taken in June, and then the subsequent action was the penalty was assessed on August 8th, and it's still pending. This individual is not very responsive in a way that we can get to solution that easily. So he's also retained an attorney. So we're actually having to work with attorneys to make sure that we don't misstep and that we can get to resolution the right way. And that's why that one is still pending as well. And what you'll see in the table here at the bottom is the tally so far for notice of non-compliance and warnings versus ones that are non-compliance with penalties at 17 each. Any questions there before I move on to the next part of the director's report?
Oh, Joe's got one. Go ahead, Joe.
I can't hear you now.
Read lips.
Steve, so LRAPA, among other things, is an enforcement agency, correct?
Yes, we are.
And so even though I really agree with the notion of carrots as well as sticks, without naming names, I know several of the owners of a couple of the businesses on this list. I know that they're very concerned with public opinion. And so I'm just wondering, does LRAPA on a regular basis publish in the newspapers, without getting into details, and maybe it's the wrong thing to do, I'm just asking the question, a list of the businesses that you're having to take enforcement action on without naming the action or any of that? Do we do that to create a little higher visibility?
Chair Joe, members of the board, Commissioner Burney, to my knowledge, we do not. And unless my staff kick me under the table, I do not think we do that.
It may be most board members don't think that's a good idea. I just think it's something to consider. It's not financial, but people's reputation, people are concerned with their reputations in the community.
Right, I see your point. There are instances where we could put some things on our website. That's another avenue if we wanted to pursue it. But a lot of times what we do when it comes to things like enforcement that are not finalized, if we're still part of the negotiation phase, we try to refrain from putting things out to the public if they have not been negotiated correctly and finally completed with the participant that was issued the enforcement action.
Okay, well, this is directed to the board more than you. It might be something we want to talk about down the road. That's all. Just public accountability.
Okay.
Yeah, let's actually, Joe, I appreciate that. And these are the type of things that are topics that I believe could be perfect for a work session.
Agreed.
And so if we can make note of that, Steve, because I think this is very appropriate to bring it to the board. And also for Travis as well, because of future things happening with us as well, electronically speaking.
Chair Joe, members of the board will make note of that. But other state agencies I'm familiar with use that method of deterrent, if you will, to show that, you know, we're going to highlight the good players, but we're also going to highlight the bad players out there. So those are the things that we can take into consideration. Okay, moving on to the outdoor burning letters, actually it's a letter permit. Been quite a little bit busy with trying to issue these types of permits throughout the summer, late summer. This one's actually for Rivers to Ridges, and this one's for you know, a good cause. They try to do this to help out the neighborhoods that are affected, but they've asked for 50 cubic yards of yard debris located in various places in Lane County. It's the Rivers to Ridges program, and so we try to help them with permitting efforts to make that, get rid of that unnecessary fuel. So this is a good thing when it comes to wildfires. And then you'll see here asbestos abatement, a total of 41 notices in July and 48 in August. And several of them were schools in Crestwell, and then there's North Eugene High School and Lane ESD. And then you'll see the tally of asbestos for the year. Again, another busy year for asbestos abatement. And I'm going to pause here because the next thing we're going to get to is, well, we'll skip over the title, the permitting tally for now. I don't think we need to talk on that too much because I want to spend the time on the public affairs report because we've got some good news to share. And usually Travis leads this part of the discussion, but I'll help out where necessary. Travis?
Sure. Thanks, Steve. So as you kind of see here on the public affairs summary, it's been very busy the last couple of months with smoke management, especially more recently. Things started getting busy in middle to late July when we started seeing some of the first wildfires on the landscape. The first thing that LRAPA was more involved in was the Wendigo, Potter, and Big Swamp fires with daily, near daily cooperator meetings that then included cooperator meetings for the Cedar Creek fire and a cooperator operator meeting is essentially a meeting where they discuss fire activity, what the fire is doing, what the forecast is, how much smoke is anticipated to be coming out of the fire, if there are any closures, and then as well as in discussion on air quality impacts to local nearby smoke sensitive receptor areas. And LRAPA is a part of those meetings and helps to communicate and pass along air quality information as relevant. Also on the smoke management wildfire side of things, Oak Ridge had a fire safety night on July 14th that LRAPA participated in to talk about fire-wise preparedness efforts in the community, and then of course the air quality aspect that goes along with wildfires. Related to Oak Ridge is the attainment designation. So for quite some time, LRAPA has been working with the Oregon DEQ and the Environmental Protection Agency to redesignate the Oak Ridge West Fur Airshed from being in non-attainment, which means not meeting federal standards set by the EPA, to being redesignated to meeting those federal standards. The last few years, a number of years, Oak Ridge has been meeting those standards. And so LRAPA has put together a plan showing, or the data showing that they have met that standard and that there's a plan to assure that air quality won't degrade back above that standard. That was approved and was published in the Federal Register on August 22nd of this year, which means that Oak Ridge is essentially redesignated to attainment. However, there's an effective date of September 21st, 2022. So it was published on the 22nd. There's 30 days before those things take effect. So that'll be later in September. I'm working with the EPA on a joint press release, a joint LRAPA EPA press release, announcing and kind of highlighting and celebrating this improvement in air quality, wintertime air quality for Oak Ridge. It's been years in the making, so that's exciting. So look for probably next week at some point, a press release coming out from LRAPA and the EPA that talks about this a little bit more in depthly. Other public outreach efforts that LRAPA has done is Bethel has been holding these events throughout the summer called Bethel Summer Fun. LRAPA has participated at a couple of them. In July, we participated on the one in July 2nd. We also presented to the Santa Clara Community Organization on July 7th, discussing public participation and the commenting process. And then we provided a purple air sensor presentation to the Citizen Advisory Committee, which Jim Daniels mentioned earlier. We have purple air sensors that we installed throughout West Eugene. So it was a look at the data from those sensors and comparing it to other places throughout Eugene. And then this is something I'm excited about, also a little have some anxiety because you don't know what you don't know, but LRAPA has been working on a new website for the last year-ish or so. It's been a big project. We are planning to jump over into the new website on Thursday, September 15th. The evening of the 14th will be kind of when the plug or the switch is pulled and the website will go from one to the other. So look forward to that. That's something I'm pretty excited about. And Steve, I see your hands up, so I'll pause.
Yeah, I wanted to emphasize that this is another one of our director's goals that we were trying to achieve. You know, Travis has taken the bull by the horns along with everyone else that's been supportive in doing the review of the website, both internal and external input on the look and feel and usefulness. And hopefully we're going to achieve the goal of trying to make a more intuitive nature website when it comes to try to find and get the information that you need. I think you'll like it. I'm hoping you'll like it. And if not, we'll have a discussion, but I'm thinking it's a great improvement of what we have been using so far. And it's a lot of work that goes into these. If you've ever had to do this in the past, wherever you work, that it's not an easy feat to do. And as time goes on, you want to have your website be to do more for you. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, I really tried to emphasize intuitiveness of the website. So hopefully it's easier to find what you're looking for than our current website, which I agree could see some improvement. Then we had some public hearings over the summer as well. Seneca Sustainable Energy and the Seneca Sawmill Company. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe, go ahead.
Oh, I just, Travis, I was just going to ask you offline. I'm sorry. But could I have a sentence or two on the website and why? Because I would like to bring that up when I introduce Dietrich to the Board of Commissioners in a couple of weeks.
Okay, so essentially just LRAPA has a new website. Here's why it's important, and send that your way.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Don't forget to include the part where it's the way it's constructed or designed. It's not proprietary, so we can move and be flexible in that manner, which I think is very huge when it comes to from an agency perspective and costs.
Yeah, WordPress is the website or the program, I guess you could say, that we're using, the new website, which is open source in the same way that like Linux as an operating system for computers open source, which provides more flexibility to shop around vendors without having to completely rebuild a new website. I'll include details about that as well.
And Travis, if I may, air quality right now, which relates to fires and smoke, among other things, is sort of at top of mind for a lot of people. We at the Board of Commissioners are actually getting comments I never would have anticipated, because I'm thinking, hey, we're getting through the summer without a big fire here. This is good. But I think that we just use this to elevate the brand of LRAPA in the community, because I anticipate with this website, and if we elevate it, you're going to get a lot more traffic. There's a lot of people that just don't know where to go and don't even realize what LRAPA does. So I think it's a big deal. That's all.
I agree. I think a website is the first way you interface with the public, and having a good website is very important for that initial interface. And some of the pages that are in it that are expanded a little bit more so than our current website is discussion about wildfire, smoke in general, actions you can take to protect your air quality, indoor air quality as well, and then prescribed burnings, which is another thing that comes up also. Steve?
I was just going to say, if we're done talking about the website, I was just going to give a little bit of a primer here before you go into the public hearings and the Seneca Sustainable Energy and the sawmill. We put this in here because we got some questions ahead of time from Vice Chair Janine and some others about the status of Seneca. So we put all this information in here so we can talk about it. A lot of what you'll see here is they are required, the steps that we had to take. And so there's a lot more information available in the links that you can see, and Travis will go over that in a minute. But I just wanted to say this is one of the ways we're using the director's report to answer some of the questions that we get leading up to board meetings. Travis?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So we had, as Steve mentioned, public hearings on Seneca that's here at the request of Janine Parisi. The first facility to see some, both facilities are going through a permit renewal and modification and going through the public process. There was a public comment period on Seneca Sustainable Energy that started in early June and went to the end of July for 55 days. There was an informational hearing, meeting and public hearing on July 11th. It was a hybrid meeting where we were at the library and then participation online. The in-person participants were mostly from the facility, but we did have one woman who joined us in person, but she was there because it was hot outside that day and the library was cool and it was an accessible place for her to go. So she stepped in to cool off, but most of our participation was online. Seneca Sawmill Company went through a permit renewal and modification that's jointly related to Seneca Sustainable Energy and the regulation of them, which is a complicated point on these two facilities here in this permit renewal process. That public comment period was open in mid-July through August 22nd, which was 40 days. There was a public informational meeting on July 11th with the Seneca Sustainable Energy's public hearing. And then we had a second informational meeting ahead of the public hearing, which took place on August 10th. That second public hearing was virtual only due to the lack of in-person participation we had at Seneca Sustainable Energy. We felt the resources would be better used just keeping it online. And the permit issuance for both of those facilities will be issued on the same day, and that's anticipated later this month. And then other things that LRAPA participated on during this period, as I mentioned, was the Bethel Summer Fun, the community organization, and then the Wildfire Safety Night. Steve, is there anything you want to add that I left out?
Sorry about that. I was just going to say that these, one of these permits for Seneca is a Title V permit. The other one is an ACDP permit, and they're linked together because of federal HAPS requirements, hazardous air pollutants. The tricky part about this one is they both have to be issued on the same day, so that neither part of this facility with two separate permits is in violation of any of our rules. So it's been a little bit of a complex process, but all these steps that we took here, including the fact that EPA still has 45 days to review the Title V permit, which is why they can't issue anything until after September 19th. We have to take all that into consideration, and that's where we are right now. In the meantime, we're putting together our response documents that go out to the public, which is, a response to their comments that either they sent in or made at the public hearings. And we tried to provide as much educational opportunity to the public as possible, knowing that this is also a facility that's going to be called into Cleaner Air Oregon, which also heightens the interest by the public.
Thank you, Steve.
And then finally, the end of this report is just a media summation of press releases and media inquiries that I took.
Got a quick question, Steve. So this type of engagement that we've had with Seneca, is it typical with all Title V and ACDP renewals?
The timelines that we have, the short answer is yes on most of it. There are some uniqueness to this particular facility because we're dealing with two permits at the same time and trying to make sure they end at the same time and get reissued. At the same time, Title V has extra comment periods because EPA gets their 45 days. The other thing we look at is, like for this one, for example, Seneca Sustainable Energy is being called into Cleaner Air Oregon. As a matter of fact, the facility is actually volunteered to be called in earlier because they're ready to go forward with it. Is another aspect that we look at in our criteria to pick how much public engagement is required or necessary for us to do our jobs and to educate the residences that could be affected by this permit action or the emissions from these facilities. So we have criteria that we use internally, whether it's a Clean Air Oregon facility, whether there's been a history of complaints in not too distant past, whether there's been enforcement actions taken against the facility in the last 3 to 5 years, the level of emissions that are coming from this facility, the types of hazardous air pollutants or toxic chemicals, that we take all that into consideration because we know that a lot of the public in and around living in and around these facilities are very sensitive to opportunities to make comments and concern about their air quality. So we're making sure that if it warrants, by meeting some of those criteria that I just named there, that we're going to do whatever we can to make sure there's ample opportunity for not only for public education, but also public engagement in the public process of getting comments from the facility. Not all of these facilities were raised to this level of complexity or need to have this level of public engagement. Not all of them will require it.
So it doesn't appear as though it's like there's not a one size fits all. Is that what you're saying? But should there not be?
That's correct. No, there is not one size fits all, but the criteria we use that says Clean Air Oregon, air toxics involved, major source like this one is because it's Title V, compliance history and complaints that we've received all feed into whether or not we're going to do an enhanced version of public engagement. That's really what it comes down to.
So is that information available for people to look at and find it, and being part of our goal to be transparent? Should that information, that criteria, should that not be available to be discovered by whoever wants to see it?
It can be made available. A lot of it already comes from the documents that exist from the Cleaner Air Oregon toolkit that comes from DEQ that we follow, but we enhance it a little bit to fit LRAPA's needs. So that document already is out there, but we can also make it available on our website the same.
I think that would be a wise step, very wise step. So so nothing, no one can look at it and say we got blindsided.
Yeah. So
and I think that would just be smart. And it also sounds like Seneca is really, at least from my perspective, sounds like they're pretty much bending over backwards to make sure that everybody's on the same sheet of music and that there's compliance. And I just want to make sure that we're not taking advantage of that or not recognizing that they are trying hard to conduct their business in a safe manner for everybody.
Chair Joe, members of the board, as a matter of fact, this facility's been proactive. They have been participatory in our public meetings that we've had, our public hearings. They've been present there. They provided their own comments to some of the comments that were made, and they've met with us and reviewed our process ahead of time, our community engagement plan, so they knew what was going to happen. And then they're being as patient as they can be when it comes to us doing our work, engaging the public, and then issuing their permit.
Good to hear. All right, probably beat this horse enough. What's next on the list?
I didn't want to be remiss before we get to this final page of the director's report. I skipped over the Title V and ACDP table for permits. And I just wanted to point out that we're on course to address our backlog for Title V, to have it to be less than 20% by the end of the calendar year. We're on course to do that, which is a great achievement that we needed to try to take care of. In other words, going from the 43 or 45% backlog down to less than 20% has been a pretty good effort, if I might say so myself, that the permit writers are proud of, to be able to get to this point and be able to say that we're getting rid of that backlog as quickly as we can. With the next one that we're going to set our sights on is what's in the ACDP world itself, and do the same amount of effort to get that in a manageable backlog, which will be reflected eventually. You'll see in the dashboard report that you'll see in October, as far as progress made so far. Okay, now we can go to the final page of the director's report. And in there, I just wanted to show that what's on the horizon. You see September, what we have there. I mentioned the dashboard you're going to see in October, as well as the status report on Oak Ridge Air project that we normally give. And then in November is when we're going to look at approval of a local dues request for the intergovernmental agreement for fiscal year 24. That'll be on the agenda. And then we hope to be able to get you the Airmetrics business plan that we've been promising this fall, to get to you to see how we're doing there. Incidentally, we're in the process of moving Airmetrics from its current location to a new location on Centennial Avenue, pretty close to the Jerry's area, where the Jerry's hardware store is located, on that stretch of Centennial. We're planning on getting relocated by the middle of this month. And then you see the December no meeting, and what's on store for next year. Any questions or things I need to expand more on? I see a hand up from Commissioner Joe.
One of the board meeting dates in September, October, and November is likely going to be a work session and not a board meeting. So I'm presuming, forgive me, but I'm presuming that you can take care of that and get everything done, even if we don't space them out the way you've listed right there.
If we need to do some shuffling on agenda items, yeah, we'll make that work.
Okay, that's all. Thanks.
And go ahead, Mike.
So I noticed that we have on the November agenda to discuss Airmetrics, and that was one thing I wanted to make sure was on the radar, as it's still losing money in our current financial report. The other piece is we had talked about, and it was in the minutes, about a possible rule change to the outdoor burning based on fire season. I was just kind of wondering when we might think that possibly would be coming back to the board.
Maybe in our next work session.
Chair Joe, members of the board, that's a good question. I wasn't sure if we wanted to go forward with making a rule change like that. Right now, currently, the no burn deadline happens around June 15th, I think it is. It was quite a bit of discussion back and forth when we had the meeting earlier this year. The pros and cons of moving that around or changing the ability to change that date more easily, the pros and cons of doing that. If I can make a suggestion, there's a number of rule changes that are coming that we're going to have to incorporate from DEQ. They're in the process of making a lot of rule changes that we're going to have to incorporate in the next year or two, depending on how fast they get through their process. If we can't incorporate by reference, we're going to have to do our own rule changes because their language may not quite line up. That will be the opportunity to probably look at that at the same time, if I can make that suggestion.
Yeah, oh, and that's fine. I know that I had several constituents who live in the rural part of Lane County around us, so wet in the early part of the year, there was just no way they could burn. And so they were asking, why couldn't we extend that 15 days? And when I brought that up, you said, well, that would just mean a rule change. And, that's kind of something that makes sense. If we let the fire board kind of determine, when that window of fire danger is, as long as air quality is still good, I would certainly love to see something like that, as a possible outcome.
I concur, Mike. I think it's worth discussion, and which is a perfect example for another work session. At least just, slate 15, 20 minutes on that. And so we can discuss it as a board and come up with a mutually agreeable plan, because it's our rules. So I think we have the authority to change our rules.
Mayor, Joe, members of the board, that's all I had intended to present on the director's report today.
Oh, thank you, Steve. That was a very good report. Any other questions? And actually a very thorough report. Appreciate that. Any questions from the board? Final questions regarding that. All right. The next item is old business. Anything from old business with staff or board members? All right. Any new business coming from the board members or staff? Well, I guess this is my time to call this meeting adjourned 6 minutes earlier than slated. Very good. So thank you very much. Everybody have a wonderful day and enjoy the weather. Yeah, Terry, take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This meeting's adjourned.
Thanks all.